Welcome to the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. This is episode 13 of this show, and we have an excellent week in the sports world. We have the MLB season, 60 games into the year. You have teams like the New York Yankees who are doing what they do best and dominate MLB. You have the NBA Finals. You have the Golden State Warriors, the Boston Celtics, two of the best teams in all of the NBA going head to head at the TD Garden, at the Chase Center. They are trying to figure out who is the best team in the NBA today. And we'll talk about the NBA Finals, give you a little update about that later in the show here on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. The NFL world is a lot of exciting news, and we're going to focus on that in just a minute. And then in the second hour, we'll talk about the NHL. We'll get into the Eastern Conference Finals, the bad blood that's going on between Tampa Bay and New York. So, here on tonight's episode of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we got our main topic, and let's get into the fact that Deshaun Watson, lawsuit number 24 has been placed upon Deshaun Watson. And unlike the last 23, there has been two new situations that have developed with Deshaun Watson that are very valuable. First, when it comes to Deshaun Watson, the 24th lawsuit that has been brought down beyond him, it has gone into light the Cleveland Browns and their organization. It has allowed the Cleveland Browns to look deeper and deeper into these allegations. It is allowing the Cleveland Browns organization to do what they should have done in the first place, which is try to figure out if all of these allegations and if all these lawsuits are legit, to see if Deshaun Watson actually committed all of the crimes that he has been accused of. Now, that's the first part. All right, first part is what the Cleveland Browns are going to do. Second part is what the NFL is going to do regarding Deshaun Watson. Because one aspect that a lot of fans in the sports world seem to forget when having this dialogue is the NFL has their own ruling they have to make with Deshaun Watson. The NFL has their own decision and their own appeal unit in their own division in the NFL that decides how many games a certain player is going to be suspended for. That division of the NFL is what allows them to decide how many games Deshaun Watson is going to be suspended for. Because I don't think that it is a foregone conclusion that he is going to be suspended. Most people are pretty smart. They know that he is going to be suspended for some time in 2022. The major question is, how many games is Deshaun Watson going to be suspended for? How many games is Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns not going to be on the same field for 2022? Now, there has been a lot of rumors and a lot of reports that have come out that the Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson could be facing an entire 17-game suspension because of what happened. Now, I'm not going to go that far, because you have to understand that the NFL, at the end of the day, when it comes to civil lawsuits, when it comes to stuff that happens off the field, they are not as tough as opposed to sports betting. They are not really tough on civil cases and domestic violence as they are about PEDs. Understand that the NFL, they're going to treat this Deshaun Watson situation with less severity than what Calvin Ridley did by betting on his own team to win. So, when it comes to the NFL, I wonder if there is a way to determine in the past what the NFL has done in similar cases to see what they will do with Deshaun Watson. Well, I'm going to take you back to the early 2010s because in the early 2010s, there was a quarterback who had a sexual assault case that was on him. Understand that there was a certain quarterback who, ironically enough, is in the AFC North. He just retired a while ago, who was accused of sexually assaulting a woman. And even though prosecutors declined to pursue criminal charges, the NFL still suspended him for 6 games. Now, that situation happened to be former Steelers quarterback and maybe future Hall of Famer Ben Roethlisberger. In 2010, he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman in a Georgia nightclub back in 2010. And even though he was never pursued criminal charges, even though he was never charged with anything, the NFL suspended him 6 games. Now, that's going to be kind of a recent example that you could use that the NFL did when it came to sexual assault. But that was only one case. Understand that that was only one case with Ben Roethlisberger. Deshaun Watson has 24. So, is it going to be more than 6 games? Understand that they did that for Ben Roethlisberger? Most likely. As a matter of fact, I can actually see him being suspended for 12 games. I could see him being suspended for 75% of the season. I actually think that that's actually a recent example that could take place. But let's keep going. Let's keep going at the recent examples that the NFL has done when it comes to sexual assault to see if there's a pattern with the NFL. Now, you also had in 2018 the Kareem Hunt case, who actually plays for the Cleveland Browns now, but this was being done in Kansas City. Now, Kareem Hunt, he was filmed, assaulting a woman, shoving her to the ground, kicking her. He wasn't pressed charges, but the NFL did act on it, and it was an 8-game suspension. Now, the difference between Kareem Hunt and Deshaun Watson is that, one, it was only one case, but secondly, the women didn't press charges. Unlike this situation, he has had 24 civil lawsuits being charged against Deshaun Watson. So Ben Roethlisberger had a 6-game suspension. Kareem Hunt had an 8-game suspension, but those were less severe and had less than what Deshaun Watson has done. When it comes to New York Times columnists who called for a lifetime ban of Deshaun Watson, I disagree completely. I don't think that he needs to be banned for a lifetime. There was somebody who said he needs to be suspended for 2 years. I'm not going to go that far. When it comes to Deshaun Watson, once again, you got to remember that, yes, the Cleveland Browns, they could try to find a way to get out of it. But at the end of the day, it is going to be the NFL's ruling that's probably going to determine what Cleveland does next. If the NFL suspends Deshaun Watson for 6 games, the Cleveland Browns are most likely not going to try to opt out and or find a clause in the contract that will allow them to escape all the guaranteed money that they did with Deshaun Watson. If he gets suspended for 8 games, I'm going to say the same thing. He probably would not be trying to get out of all the guaranteed money when it comes to Cleveland Browns organization. However, I do believe that if it is a year suspension, or even let's go one step further and say the Miami Herald columnist who said that he'd be suspended for 2 years, if that ends up happening, for sake of the argument, then maybe, just maybe, Deshaun Watson will end up being voided of his contract with the Cleveland Browns. Because at that point, if he's being suspended for 17 games, 34 games, if Deshaun Watson is ending up being suspended for that long, then the Cleveland Browns will have an excuse and will have a reason to let go of Deshaun Watson. Remind you that the Deshaun Watson Cleveland Browns situation, the Cleveland Browns already knew about all these allegations. The Cleveland Browns already knew about how many cases were on Deshaun Watson when they traded for him. The Cleveland Browns knowingly paid Deshaun Watson the guaranteed money, despite the fact that he hadn't played an MLB game in a whole year. Understand that when it comes to Deshaun Watson, it has been since 2020 that he has played an NFL game. Now, I mentioned MLB recently because if there was any example that is not NFL that is similar to what Deshaun Watson is going through, then let's examine what MLB did with Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer last year was suspended for 2 years by Major League Baseball when 3 different women accused him of violent assault during sexual encounters. He was suspended even though it was decided not to pursue criminal charges against the pitcher. Understand that when it came to the LA Dodgers, they have him still under contract despite the fact that MLB has suspended him for 2 full seasons. Trevor Bauer, he did not play the rest of the 2021 season. He has not played at all for 2022. But yet the Dodgers are still having to pay, and the LA Dodgers are still having him under contract with Trevor Bauer. So if you take that example in MLB and you examine what the Dodgers have had to do with Trevor Bauer during his 2-year suspension that MLB put on him for the sexual assault of 3 different women, you can kind of look at Deshaun Watson and say, would the NFL use that model to go after him? Now, my angle, I've been saving this for a while, but my angle is that I believe that the Cleveland Browns are going to find a way to void his contract. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. I truly believe that the Cleveland Browns, their management, their executives, the people who are at the top, are going to find any sneaky way, any clever way of getting out of Deshaun Watson's contract. Because when it comes to Deshaun Watson, if he gets suspended, all right, if he does get suspended for an insane amount of time, you have to remember that the Cleveland Browns could use that as a solid argument for getting out of their contract. The Cleveland Browns could try to use a situation like this to get out of Deshaun Watson's contract. So as we're in the first segment of this show talking about the Deshaun Watson situation, do I believe the Cleveland Browns are going to try to find a way to not pay the guaranteed money with Deshaun Watson? Do I believe it is plausible that the Cleveland Browns organization is going to try to find any clever way of getting out of the Deshaun Watson contract? My answer is absolutely yes. Because the people in Cleveland really are not speaking highly of Deshaun Watson. People who are in the Browns organization have come out and said that they really do not think highly of Deshaun Watson. The Cleveland Browns organization has had to deal with this in the past with the Kareem Hunt deal when he got suspended for 8 games. Understand when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, considering what they have done as an organization, I believe if it's in their best interest that once the NFL makes their ruling, once the NFL makes their concrete decision on how many games Deshaun Watson is going to be suspended, the Cleveland Browns will use that as an argument on how to get out of Deshaun Watson's guaranteed money. They will use that argument as to why they do not need to pay him all the guaranteed money that they agreed to with Deshaun Watson not even 2 months ago. So people are going to ask this question. All right, $230 million, fully guaranteed. You know, it was the largest contract in terms of guaranteed money. Well, what would happen to that money? What would happen to all of that guaranteed money if they were able to void the contract? If they were able to get out of Deshaun Watson's deal, they were able to get him out of Cleveland, what would happen to the $230 million that they paid him? Well, I can answer that question for you. Because that money would become dead money. Understand that in the NFL, they have what they call active money and they have what they call dead money. And dead money goes to players and or contracts that are no longer active with said organization. Understand that when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, that $230 million wouldn't all of a sudden just go back to them and they could spend it on another quarterback. When it comes to the Cleveland Browns, they would have to do what Trevor Bauer's contract has been having to do in LA. Essentially, be dead money that organization has to keep on for the remainder of those 5 years. Understand that the Cleveland Browns can't just poof and it disappears. The Cleveland Browns are going to have to keep that money on their payroll, regardless if he's there or not. Now, I want to ask all people watching around the world. I want to ask all the people who are watching the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. What do you think about the Deshaun Watson situation? 24 lawsuits now have been filed on the guy. Do you believe that he will be suspended for a long time? Do you believe that the NFL is going to make the right decision when it comes to Deshaun Watson? Or do you see the Cleveland Browns ending up getting rid of Deshaun Watson based off of the decision the NFL does make? I want to know from all people watching around the world, because I truly believe that the Cleveland Browns are sitting back and waiting on the NFL decision, because that NFL decision is going to determine a lot of money when it comes to Cleveland. It is going to determine the guaranteed money, that $230 million that Cleveland was going to give Deshaun Watson. That is a lot of money hanging over the head of the Cleveland Browns. That's a lot of money that they're going to be figuring out to do, and what they're going to be figuring out to do with in the next couple of weeks. So, continuing with our NFL conversation here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Now, before we get into the NFL Week 1 odds, before we really break down the opening lines that happened very recently here in the sportsbook capital of the world, I want to give a quick shout out to the Las Vegas Raiders. Hunter Renfrow, he's been signed to a 2-year deal, $32 million with $21 million guaranteed. The Pro Bowl wide receiver out of Clemson had a phenomenal 2021 campaign, and the Las Vegas Raiders rewarded him handsomely for his contributions. So I wanted to give that quick shout out to the Las Vegas Raiders, to Hunter Renfrow on his new contract. Now, Raiders fans are going to have to ask the question, you've paid Hunter Renfrow, you have paid Derek Carr, you've paid Max Crosby, but what about Darren Waller? What about the big tight end? What about the big TE? Are they going to pay Darren Waller as well? Are they going to find a way to pay Denzel Perryman, the Pro Bowl linebacker, as well? There's a lot of interesting situations that are going to be developing in Las Vegas in the upcoming future. So I will say here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, when it comes to the Vegas situation, when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, I am really curious to see what they do with Darren Waller before the season starts. The NFL needs to be consistent and treat each player the same with penalties. Cleveland Browns made a mistake signing him and will rectify it by terminating Watson for cause. But here's the problem, and I thank you for the comment. Here's the problem. When you terminate a contract, Yes, you have force majeure. Yes, you have that. But the Cleveland Browns are going to have either a clause in the contract or is going to have enough evidence to justifiably get rid of Deshaun Watson. The problem the Cleveland Browns are going to have is that the same thing that happened with Trevor Bauer and the Los Angeles Dodgers. Anybody who was ever curious about what happened at the end of that Trevor Bauer case, he was found innocent with those 3 women. He had rough sex with them, but it was not sexual assault. And because it was not sexual assault, the Los Angeles Dodgers could not void his contract. Because he was actually never officially charged with anything, they could not let him go. So with Deshaun Watson, you really have to ask yourself this, and I really want you to sit back and think about this. Unless he gets charged, unless he criminally gets charged with all the massages, all the happy endings that he got out there in Houston, until he gets criminally processed or either gets civilly processed, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, the MLB, you name it, it's really hard to terminate a contract without having a reason for it. It's really hard to terminate a contract unless it is justifiable, like the situation that's happened in the past with guys like Ray Rice. All right, that was terminated by contract because there was a video of him knocking out somebody. When the Kansas City Chiefs moved on from Kareem Hunt, they did it because there was evidence of him punching and kicking a woman on live video. So I really want the commenter to stop and think about that for a second. It's going to be extremely hard for the Cleveland Browns to terminate his contract unless he gets charged with all those lawsuits. Unless he gets charged with being in the wrong. If he does get charged, then by all means, you have to let him go. But if he doesn't, then I have a feeling that's going to be extremely difficult for the Cleveland Browns to let him go. Hunter Renfrow, if they pay and keep their core players intact, they will be unstoppable. It all depends on the head coach. It really all depends on who the coach is, and it really depends on his style and how it relates to Las Vegas. Until we see Josh McDaniels put on the headset and operate the team as his team, we're going to have to wait and see how Las Vegas does. I think the over and under right now is 8 for Las Vegas, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2022. They were a playoff team last year, but that team was built with John Gruden in mind. That was a team that Gruden put together and was really starting to come along in that last season before he got let go. So it'll be curious to see what happens in 2022. They're going to be really successful or they're going to fall in their face. I really don't see a middle with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, when it comes to the NFL odds for week 1 of the 2022 NFL season, there are certain games I want to point out, and there actually is a situation that I actually find pretty comical. Now, anybody who actually has been looking at this, and I'm going to give credit to FanDuel because that's where I go for all of my odds. For all of my sports books, I go to FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, the first game that is part of the NFL season in the 2022 is the Buffalo Bills Los Angeles Rams primetime game on Thursday night on Amazon. You got to understand that Buffalo versus LA is a marquee, must-see matchup in the NFL. And right now, the Buffalo Bills are a 1-point favorite over the Los Angeles Rams. Right now, they are a 1-point favorite. The over and under is 51.5. And if you're going to go by money line, the Buffalo Bills are minus 110. Now, I look at this matchup, and I really examine this. And I ask, why is it not a pick 'em? You know, I gotta look at this and go, why is it not a pick? Because, a 1-point spread is technically not a pick. When you actually look at it and really examine it, a 1-point favorite is not considered a pick 'em according to the sports books, but I actually think it should. Because the Buffalo Bills and Los Angeles Rams both have reasons as to why being a pick 'em. You have the Los Angeles Rams, the Super Bowl defending champions, at home at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. You have the Buffalo Bills, who arguably is one of the best teams going into the NFL season. They were only 17 seconds away from making it to the AFC Championship game. They lost to a coin toss. They were eliminated by Kansas City. Understand that when it comes to Buffalo, they are arguably one of the strongest teams and have been one of the best teams in the NFL for the last couple of years. So when you understand that the Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams are kind of even when you actually play out the offense, you play out the defense, both of the teams are very even heading into week 1 of the NFL season. I look at this matchup and I honestly believe that the NFL, I think that when it comes to the opening game, the primetime game of the 2022 NFL season, that it needs to be a pick 'em because both teams are very even, and I actually see both of them as being solid teams heading into week 1 of the NFL season. You have also had the matchup in the NFC South. You have a team that a lot of people are underrating right now, and that is the New Orleans Saints going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Understand that both of these teams are not going to be championship contenders. Both of these teams are not going to be gunning for a playoff spot in 2022. I'll be very surprised if both of these teams win over 7 games or 8 games this 2022 year. Now, according to FanDuel, the New Orleans Saints are a 4.5 favorite. Understand that New Orleans Saints being more than a field goal should really tell you all you need to know about the confidence in Jameis Winston. That because the game is 4.5, is pretty much implying that based off the over and under being 42.5 as well, it's not going to be a field goal matchup. It's not going to be a game that's going to be very offensive heavy because you got to understand that New Orleans is focused on their defense. The Atlanta Falcons have tried to bolster their defense over the last 2 off seasons. So I say that the Atlanta Falcons, New Orleans Saints games being 4.5, I think that's a little bit high. I believe that the New Orleans Saints and Falcons game, considering that they are on even level, and I honestly see both teams kind of being at even strength right now, I could see it being a 3.5 point game. I could see it being a field goal type of game out there in Atlanta and New Orleans. So I disagree with it being 4.5 according to FanDuel because the Saints being that high is trying to imply that this is not going to be a field goal game when I could see this easily being that type of game. So I've talked about 2 games that I actually think are not giving it enough justice. Well, I have one game that I think they're giving too much credit to the underdog. I have one game that I truly believe they're giving a lot more credit to the underdog than they are giving it to the favorite. And that is the Cleveland Browns, Carolina Panthers. Right now, according to FanDuel, the Cleveland Browns are only a 3-point favorite and a 42 over and under against the Carolina Panthers. Now, I'm going to take this into account that Baker Mayfield is going to be their starting quarterback. I'm keeping this in mind that the Cleveland Browns hold on to Baker. He's their starting quarterback in week 1. So you have 2 quarterbacks in the 2018 NFL draft class going up against each other. You have Sam Darnold and you have Baker Mayfield. And when you compare Baker Mayfield to Sam Darnold, this should be a no contest. This should really not be a field goal game. This should be a 6-point game. This should be a 7-point game. I'm really surprised that the sports books have Cleveland at only a -3 when you have Baker Mayfield going up against Sam Darnold, out of all people. So this is one matchup that I actually think they put too low when it comes to the spread. The Cleveland Browns being a 3-point favorite, that should be a lot higher. And then the last game that I believe is a little bit too low, a game that I'm going to be watching in week 1 as a Bears fan myself, and that is the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Chicago Bears. You have Jimmy Garoppolo, Illinois legend, going up against his Chicago Bears. Now, right now, the spread, according to FanDuel, is San Francisco -6.5. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but it's my show. I'm going to say whatever I want. This is too low for the 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are going to win by 2 touchdowns. The Chicago Bears, and I'm a fan of the team, by the way, so don't get mad at me for saying this. The Chicago Bears have stripped away, broke down, and have pretty much torn away bit by bit, bone by bone, the Chicago Bears defense. What used to be the strength of Chicago is no longer, and actually you could say is their weakness, and that's their defense. You don't have Khalil Mack. You don't have Eddie Goldman. You do not have Akeem Hicks. You do not have most of your guys. Dan Trevathan, he's not there. You do not have a lot of your talent that you once had. You do not have the organization that you once did. Kyle Fuller, great defensive back. He's no longer there. Safeties like Adrian Amos, he's not there anymore. When it comes to Chicago Bears, they have stripped away the entire defense. It is now going to be arguably one of the top 5 worst defenses in the NFL and going to have a bottom 10 offense in the 2022 NFL. All it tells me is that it's going to be a disaster in Chicago, and I say 6.5 for San Francisco is too little. I say it's 6.5 is being mighty generous to the Chicago Bears. Do not be surprised if it's a 2-touchdown game in Chicago when the 49ers go to Soldier Field. So we've been talking about on this show the Deshaun Watson case. We talked about the NFL Week 1 odds. We've talked about the Las Vegas Raiders. Now it's time to get into the NBA. It is time to discuss the NBA Finals, talk about the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. But before we do that, there's 2 big news that came out of Las Vegas, 2 huge announcements that we need to discuss here on the show. First is the report that LeBron James, the first active player to become a billionaire in the NBA, he said that in a very recent interview that he would not mind becoming an owner in the NBA, and he mentioned Las Vegas as a possible destination. LeBron James mentioned that owning an NBA team in Las Vegas would be a great business decision for LeBron James. Now, considering that he owns Liverpool FC, considering he owns the Boston Red Sox, considering he owns Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing in NASCAR, I am not surprised that LeBron James wants to become an owner after he retires. I am not shocked that LeBron James wants to follow in Michael Jordan's footsteps and become an owner in the NBA. And a lot of people have been asking me the last few days, what do I think about it? What do I think about LeBron James potentially becoming an owner of a team here in Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world? My answer is I like that move. I think as a businessman, LeBron James is incredible at what he does. Understand that similar to Michael Jordan, similar to his Nike deal, his Jordan brand, his race team, LeBron James is competitive. LeBron James is a smart businessman. And because LeBron James is a smart businessman, I think that he would be an excellent owner in the NBA. So if Las Vegas becomes one of the two expansion teams in the NBA, if LeBron James happens to be on the ownership group of that NBA expansion team, I am all for it. And the second big news that came out of Las Vegas is the WNBA. The WNBA Las Vegas Aces are 10-2 on the season. They have the best record in all of the WNBA at 10-2, and they're going to be having a upcoming matchup against the Los Angeles Sparks at the Crypto.com Arena. That's going to be a fantastic matchup to watch here in Las Vegas. So go support your Las Vegas Aces. Go to the Michelob Ultra Arena. Support your women basketball. Support the Las Vegas Aces for all the people who are out here in Las Vegas. I think that Kansas City is going to be the worst team in the AFC West this year. I will not be surprised if Las Vegas, LA, and Denver all surpass Kansas City. Understand the Kansas City Chiefs have lost so much talent this offseason. They've lost members of their offensive line. They trade away Tyreek Hill. They've lost Tyrann Mathieu. There is so much talent that the Kansas City Chiefs have been stripped from. I don't see it working out. Understand that he is part of the ownership group. If you do not know, the Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing has about 4 different ownership groups in it now. You have Jack Roush, you have the Fenway ownership group, and you have Keselowski, who is the driver/owner of this organization. And LeBron James 5 months ago purchased a stake in Fenway Sports Group. So because he owns a stake in Fenway Sports Group, that included the Boston Red Sox, that included Liverpool FC, and that included Roush Fenway Racing. So yes, LeBron James is a part owner of Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. I had to make that clear. But getting into the NBA Finals, you are having the Golden State Warriors and you're having the Boston Celtics. You are going to have a matchup against two of the most polar opposite teams in the NBA. You have a team that is big and a team that's very lengthy in the Boston Celtics, a team that likes to pass the ball, a team that likes to transition very easily in the NBA. Then you have the Golden State Warriors. You have the Golden State Warriors, a team that's all about shooting. A team that really does not have big men, but instead, they prefer the small ball. They prefer having the guys who are 6'1", 6'2". They prefer shooting from the outside instead of being in the post. So as the game's going on right now, you have the Boston Celtics, Golden State Warriors, Boston putting up a good performance against Golden State. You got to remember what your host, Rocco Raquelli, said on this show. You got to remember that I said here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, the Boston Celtics will win the series in 6 games. My original prediction was that the Boston Celtics will beat the Golden State Warriors in 6 games. And the way I had it was like this. Golden State will win Game 2 and will win Game 5. Boston would win Game 1, would win Game 3, will win Game 4, and then close it out in Boston for Game 6. And so far, you've had that being the case. So far, Boston won game 1. Golden State won game 2. And Boston won game 3. So, if everything goes according to plan, just think the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio for the great advice. Thank the show for all of the great content that we put out for you. Also talking about the NBA Finals, there has been the matchup with Steph Curry going up against Jason Tatum. You have two of the best superstars in the NBA today competing in the NBA Finals. Jason Tatum is doing a fantastic job in Boston. He's been banged up for the majority of the series. He suffered that injury against Miami, but he's been persevering. And I believe that the Boston Celtics, they have enough talent to beat Golden State. I truly believe that the Boston Celtics organization is going to do whatever it takes to beat Golden State. So as we're talking about the NBA here on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. You've also heard about the NBA. The NBA draft will be late in June. In fact, June 23rd will be when the NBA draft will take place. And you've had Chet Holmgren, you have Jabari Smith. There's a lot of talent with the NBA draft that's going to be coming in. And I'm going to be fantastic to see who gets drafted number 1 overall in the NBA. And any other lasting notes that we're going to talk about here in the NBA is the incident that happened with the NBA Finals. You've had the Draymond Green incident where fans have been screaming, "Freak you, Draymond," at the top of their lungs. You've had the telecast. They're trying not to pick it up, but it's very obvious what the fans are saying. And I'm going to say to you that my opinion about the fans saying "freak you, Draymond" is this. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that the Boston Celtics fans doing what they do best, getting under the skin of their opponents. Draymond Green screaming "freak you, Draymond." That's obviously getting in his head. It is getting to him as it is getting to him when it comes to organization. So I say that the Boston Celtics fans keep doing what you're doing because it is fantastic to see. There also was a report that came out about former Brooklyn Nets head coach and current Golden State Warriors assistant Kenny Atkinson signing a 4-year deal to become the new head coach with the Charlotte Hornets. This is a fantastic deal. I love what Charlotte's doing. The Charlotte Hornets bringing in Kenny Atkinson. They're bringing in a veteran. They're bringing in someone who's well-established and someone who has championship pedigree. So I look at it as a positive and not a negative. And considering they have one of the brightest young talents in LaMelo Ball right now, the Charlotte Hornets are going to be a fantastic team moving forward. And talking about the NBA draft, I actually have an NBA mock draft that I'm going to do for all of you. I have an NBA mock draft that I have already picked up and I already have selected for everyone who's watching the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I have this great concept for you, and I'm going to be doing it right here, right now, here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio with your host, Ian Rickelli. Now, the first pick is the Orlando Magic, and this one is a no-brainer. Chet Holmgren, the big 7-footer from Gonzaga. I mean, his frame, but you got to understand his frame, but at the same time, he has incredible potential. This is a guy who averaged 14, 9, and 2 in Gonzaga. This is a guy who went to Gonzaga for his one season, and he ended up changing Gonzaga for the better. Understand that Chet Holmgren is one of the most outstanding prospects in the NBA right now. So, having Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga University, having him going number 1 overall to Orlando, having him being the next great center for Orlando is a perfect decision. So, first pick in the 2022 NBA mock draft here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio is Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga, the center going to Orlando. The second overall pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I have them taking Jabari Smith, a power forward from Auburn. This guy, 6'10", 220 pounds. He is a very raw prospect. He's going to have time to develop, but he's a great shooter. He's a solid defender. He has a lot of energy. He's very charismatic, which is going to help in Oklahoma City. And understand that Oklahoma City needs a big man to team up with Shea, a big man to team up with all the talent that they brought in with guys like Josh Giddey. So the Oklahoma City Thunder, they nailed their draft last year. They can nail the draft this year. I say Jabari Smith goes to Oklahoma City at number 2. The third overall pick, the Houston Rockets. Shout out to H-Town. I have them going with shooting guard Jaden Ivey from Purdue. Now, Jaden Ivey is only 6'4", but he's explosive. He's capable of attacking the rim, and there's a fact that he can maybe play point guard in the NBA if they have to. So for a guy who's a shooting guard, point guard in college who can transition to the NBA, I believe that the Houston Rockets, they take the best prospect available, and they start the post-James Harden era with a legit superstar. So you have Jalen Green, you'll have Jaden Ivey, you'll have a great 1-2 punch out there in Houston. Fourth overall pick, the Sacramento Kings. I have them taking Keegan Murray, power forward from Iowa. The Sacramento Kings, they're a really hard team to figure out. Yes, you have Sabonis. Yes, you have these talent in Sacramento like De'Aaron Fox. But the problem is that they need a defender. They need a guy who can guard the post and consistently make shots from the perimeter. Understand that when it comes to his size, 6'8", that's a little bit under considering the modern NBA, but he is perfectly suited for the modern NBA when it comes to his shot taking. He is perfectly suited for the modern NBA when it comes to his defensive presence and what his defensive mentality is. So I have Keegan Murray from Iowa going at 4 to Sacramento. And then at number 5, the Detroit Pistons, I have them taking power forward Paolo Banchero from Duke University. The 6'10" power forward, 250 pounds, considered the safe option of the 2022 NBA draft. I mean, this guy has a really high ceiling. He's big, he's strong, he's skilled at multiple positions, and he could be an incredible building block in Detroit alongside Cade Cunningham, the number 1 overall pick in the draft last year. Now, I'm just going to go over the next picks very quickly because those are the ones you really don't talk about that much. 6th overall pick, Indiana Pacers. They'll take shooting guard Shaedon Sharpe from Kentucky. I mean, this guy never played at Kentucky, but he had to protect his status as a top 10 pick. He sat out. He had that injury, and he really had bombs in workouts. So, with him being an explosive athlete, I have Indiana taking him at 6. At 7th, you had the Portland Trailblazers, and them getting a center to really team up with Damian Lillard. I have them taking Jalen Duren from Memphis, a 6'11" center. So I have him going 7 to Portland. At number 8, the New Orleans Pelicans, with their pick they got from the Los Angeles Lakers, thanks to the Anthony Davis trade, I have them taking shooting guard Uche Ujaba from Kansas, the 6'5" senior from Kansas. I mean, this guy, he spent 4 years at Kansas. He helped them win a national title. And when it comes to the New Orleans Pelicans organization. They desperately need somebody to help out with that organization. He can help you out with that. And then the ninth pick, San Antonio Spurs. I have them taking shooting guard Benedict Murpharin, a shooting guard from Arizona, the sophomore from the 6'6", 210-pound from Arizona. Understand, this is a guy who was a star for Arizona. They were the number one seed in the NCAA tournament. He's an impressive athlete, above average shooter. And you got to understand, with them trying to build a new identity, a new process in San Antonio, he feels like the guy. And then 10th overall, the Washington Wizards. I have them taking small forward AJ Griffin from Duke University. You got to understand that the Washington Wizards, you still have Bradley Beal. They got to build around him. So having AJ Griffin would be a solid pick. And then, just because I have to talk about this, because I really have to break it down, I do have the New York Knicks, because there's a lot of people out in New York who listen to this show. I have them taking small forward Johnny Davis from Wisconsin. I think he'll be a solid guy for the New York Knicks. Now, game to the comments real quick. The Celtics are outplaying Golden State. Great play, even with Golden State. Curry and Tatum both hurt and are still playing. Absolutely is talking about endurance. That really shows the desire to win. Understand that when it comes to Jason Tatum, when it comes to Steph Curry, they are injured. They are hurting right now. But make no mistake about it, they are going to do whatever it takes to win. They are going to do whatever it takes to win an NBA championship out there in Boston and or Golden State. Now, I will say that the Boston Celtics, I still have them winning this series. It's been a really good game 4, by the way. But when it comes to Boston, when it comes to Golden State, I think that Boston is going to win this series. And I'm going to keep my prediction that the Boston Celtics are going to win Title 17, and they're going to beat Golden State in the 2022 NBA Finals. To answer your question, no. LeBron James does not have a brother in the NBA. He does have a son in Bronny James, who is in high school right now. That might be the person you're thinking of. LeBron James, he is somebody that, he'll be retiring in about 2 or 3 years. So having his son come into the league around that same time, it's been no secret, and it's really never been no secret, that LeBron James wants to play with his kid. It's been not a shocker that LeBron James wants to be the first father-son duo in NBA history. So that might be what you're talking about. Talking about Portland, what do you think about the sale and how it affects this year's play? I think what Portland did was fantastic. I brought on a guest very recently, Arphinius Frazier from No Filter Productions, and I do agree with him that having Portland being sold opens a lot more possibility for the Portland Trailblazers. Them having that much money, thanks to Phil Knight, thanks to Nike, it's going to allow the Portland Trailblazers to spend more money. It's going to allow the Portland Trailblazers to build more around Damian Lillard. So I think it's an excellent decision, and I am happy to see it. Now, moving over to the NHL side, here are the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. The Colorado Avalanche, they beat the Edmonton Oilers in 4 games. They have swept the Edmonton Oilers to move on to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche for being successful and beating the Edmonton Oilers in 4 games. The Colorado Avalanche, they have been the strongest team in the NHL this season. The Colorado Avalanche, when it comes to strength in numbers, have been the best organization all year round. Do not be surprised if Colorado does win the championship because of how strong they have been. Winning their 3rd title in franchise history. That would be an excellent situation out there in Colorado. Now, the Eastern Conference Finals. The Eastern Conference is a different story. See, understand that Colorado, they beat up on Edmonton. They got rid of them easy. No ifs, ands, or buts. However, Tampa Bay and New York has been a different story. Tampa Bay versus New York has been a bloodbath. Tampa Bay versus New York has been a rivalry that the NHL have been wanting to take advantage of. Understand, Tampa Bay and New York have had bad blood for the last 8 or 9 years. Understand, there was the infamous brawl with Artem Anisimov when he was with the New York Rangers. He did the mimicking of the weapon that caused a full-on brawl between Tampa Bay and New York. You've also had the Lafreniere and the Stamkos fight that happened after Game 5, this whole scrum that affected the entire team after the 0-0. So, when it comes to Tampa Bay and New York, they do not like each other. That's already been well established. But this series is heading into Game 6. Understand that Game 6 in Tampa Bay is going to be a must-see. Understand that having Tampa Bay versus New York being played at the Amalie Arena in Tampa Bay, it is going to show the best of the best between Tampa Bay and between New York. Understand that when it comes to Tampa Bay, Andrei Vasilevskiy has been the best playoff goaltender in the last 4 seasons. Understand that Andrei Vasilevskiy, since 2020, there has not been a goaltender more hot in the postseason than Andrei Vasilevskiy. There has been no goalie who's been more clutch in elimination games than Andrei Vasilevskiy. So you have the best playoff goalie going up against the best regular season goalie in Igor Shesterkin. Igor Shesterkin is going to win the Vezina for the best goalie in hockey. And this series, you've been seeing 2 of the best Russians in the league go at it. You're seeing 2 of the best goalies in their prime at 26 and 25 respectively going up against each other. This matchup has been about grit and goaltending. I'm going to say that one more time. This series has been about grit and goaltending. It has been about the fact that this organization in Tampa Bay has been all about defense. You've had guys like Mikhail Sergachev, who scored 2 goals in Game 4. You had Mikhail Sergachev start a full-out brawl between Tampa Bay and New York by getting in the face of Ryan Lindgren. So, you've had the grit from Tampa Bay and New York, and you've had the goaltending matchup that most hockey fans were excited to see once this series was announced. In fact, I'm going to put an argument out here. And you know what? I want to see if Vegas Golden Knights fans agree with me on this. I truly believe that this series has been the best series in the playoffs so far. I truly believe that in terms of intensity, in terms of back and forth, in terms of competition, New York versus Tampa Bay has been the best series that they have had on the schedule. Now, I want to know if you guys agree or disagree with me. That's fine if you do or don't. I think Carolina versus New York would be a close second. But I think that New York versus Tampa Bay has been by far the most entertaining, the most exciting, and the most passionate rivalry that the NHL playoffs have had so far in 2022. It has been the most must-see box office attraction that the NHL has had in the 2022 playoffs. So getting back to the comments here on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. Colorado will be cold when they play Tampa Bay in the Stanley Cup's first game, but it will be easy for them to get rolling once they are hot. Well, a lot of people were saying that about Colorado when they took on St. Louis. There were people who said that after they easily got rid of Nashville, that Colorado was going to start suffering. That because they had all this time off going up against St. Louis, they were going to have a very tough time going up against them. But sure enough, they easily got rid of St. Louis. It wasn't even a 7-game series. You also got to remember that in this series against Edmonton, there was a possibility that there could be some rust with Colorado. And sure enough, they beat Edmonton in a 4-game sweep. So if they hadn't beat Edmonton so easily, if they didn't take care of St. Louis so strategically, and if they didn't dispatch of Dallas so lackadaisically, then I would agree with you. But unfortunately, we've seen in this postseason that rust, lack of ice time, lack of recent games, they do not affect Colorado. So I respectfully disagree with you. I am, as a Vegas Golden Knight fan, very proud of the Rangers, Gerard Gallant, Ryan Reeves, and their ability to keep up with Tampa Bay, something not many thought they could do. I don't think it was about them keeping up with Tampa Bay. I think a lot of people didn't expect Tampa Bay and New York to be as violent and as vicious as it's been. I don't think a lot of people expected John Cooper and Gerard Gallant, two very good friends, by the way, to have the animosity that they've had in this series. I really did not expect Ryan McDonough, a former New York Ranger, to be going up against his former teammates as aggressively as he has. So understand that this series, it really wasn't about what many people thought they could do. I don't think many people saw the Tampa Bay Lightning New York Rangers series being as extensively insane and extensively vicious as it has been. So I think that's really what the main difference was. And continuing with the NHL conversation here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, there was the news article that came out recently where a Rangers fan assaulted a Lightning fan on live video. There was the violent incident that happened in Game 5 where a Rangers fan violently assaulted a Lightning fan in Madison Square Garden. This video was recorded, it was documented, and that fan has been banned from Madison Square Garden. So for Madison Square Garden, I got to give them a round of applause for doing the right thing. I got to give the Madison Square Garden a lot of respect for banning a fan for beating up another fan. I've said this for a long time, and I'll say this again. I do not care how passionate you are. I do not care how die-hard you are. You do not, and I'm going to repeat this, you do not put your hands on another person. You do not beat up another fan just because they wear another person's sweater. So I give a round of applause to Madison Square Garden for doing that. So, mad respect to them. I think Gerard Gallant would win that, considering Gerard Gallant played in the NHL, which, by the way, some people actually didn't know about that. But Gerard Gallant is a former player. I mean, this is a guy who played with the Detroit Red Wings. This is a guy who was drafted in 1981 by the Detroit Red Wings. Understand, this is a guy who played with Detroit from 1984 to 1993. So this guy played a lot of seasons in the NHL. In fact, he played 615 games as a NHLer. That was Gerard Gallant. So some people do forget about that. So I will say to you that if you had the coaches go out and do it, most likely it would be Gerard Gallant, considering that he actually played in the NHL, unlike John Cooper, who actually played junior hockey. All right. He played junior hockey, but I don't think he ever played in the NHL. So that would be the main difference. The other news that came out of the NHL world was the trade that happened this morning. You had the Buffalo Sabres trade future considerations to the Dallas Stars for goaltender Ben Bishop and a 7th-round pick in 2022. So the Buffalo Sabres acquired Ben Bishop's near $5 million contract, and they did get a draft pick from the Dallas Stars. Now, there's two reasons for why this happened. First off, Ben Bishop is only going to get paid $5 million for one more season after signing that 6-year, $29.5 million deal with the Dallas Stars back in 2017. Also remember that Ben Bishop, last year, he played in one game before being injured. So, because of the fact that Ben Bishop has had an injury-prone type of career, and the fact that Ben Bishop and his contract was huge for the Dallas Stars, them getting rid of Ben Bishop, clearing the way for Jake Ottinger to be the number one goalie, it is a win-win for both sides. The Buffalo Sabres, they add cap space, they do get a draft pick in return, and the Dallas Stars end up getting $5 million off the books, which helps them long term. So I give a lot of respect to the Buffalo Sabres for making this trade, for finding a way to help out both sides. There was also the report that came out of Buffalo, and I was talking to a friend of mine recently, so that's how I found this out. Shout out to WFO, the Power 96.5 out there in Buffalo, New York, because the Buffalo Sabres are going to retire long-time goalie Ryan Miller. His number 30 jersey with the Buffalo Sabres. He announced his retirement this past season. So, with Ryan Miller, who played 18 seasons in the NHL, one of the only 39 goalies in NHL history to win 300 games in his career, he is going to have his jersey retired by the Buffalo Sabres. So that's a huge amount of respect given from the Buffalo Sabres to Ryan Miller, the guy who was their goalie from 2002 to 2014. Now, I want to ask this question because I've been, talking to Vegas Golden Knights fans. I've been talking to people who love the Vegas Golden Knights, and they've been asking this question, and I kind of want to answer it. I do believe that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have a difficult roster decision to make with free agency heading. I do believe that the Vegas Golden Knights are only have $200,000 in cap space. They have to sign 5 players. The Vegas Golden Knights have to fill the remaining 5 roster spots here in Las Vegas. So the question is, you really need to ask, is when it comes to Riley Smith, he's a free agent. He's going to probably go back to Detroit, go to New York. He's going to go to an organization that he has familiarity with. Understand that Riley Smith's probably a goner. Guys like Matthias Janmark, Gage Quinney, those are guys who are free agents. They're going to be on their way out. The Vegas Golden Knights are probably going to try to give him a qualifying offer, but that's about it. The Vegas Golden Knights have restricted free agents. A lot of them have to go into arbitration, so the Vegas Golden Knights don't have to sweat that much about the arbitration deals. Now, the two deals that the Vegas Golden Knights really have to stress out about, and the organization really has to come to the mental conclusion, is who are the players that they are willing to let go? Who are the players the Vegas Golden Knights organization is willing to shake hands and walk away? Because when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, it really feels, and this is just my perspective, it really feels like the Vegas Golden Knights are in a pickle. It really feels like the Vegas Golden Knights are in a weird kind of Frankenstein position where either they're going to trade somebody with value to shed the cap space, and they're only going to get like a draft pick, maybe get future considerations back just to clear cap space, or the Vegas Golden Knights are going to buy out a player. They're going to buy somebody out in order to bring in somebody else. The Vegas Golden Knights have been known for doing that in the past. They've been known for trying to clear cap space in order to bring in somebody new. Now, I've maybe have done this segment on my show before, but I'm going to do it again because I really want to talk about it here on the show. There is a trio of NHL players on the Vegas Golden Knights that I believe could be let go. There is a trio of players that I think are priority 1, priority 2, and then priority 3. The first player that if they have to let somebody go, if they have to trade somebody, they have to buy out somebody, if there is someone that has a big enough cap hit that the Vegas Golden Knights need to take off their books and they could justify it, I say that's Alec Martinez. Alec Martinez, the 34-year-old, he's going to get paid $5.25 million for the next 2 seasons. This guy scored 8 points in 26 games last year with the Vegas Golden Knights. He was injured for majority of the season. He did not play near a 2/3 of the NHL season. I understand that Alec Martinez, they got him from the LA Kings at the trade deadline 2 years ago. Alec Martinez, they signed him to that deal. He has a modified no-trade clause, which is, I think, 16, if I remember correctly. So, when it comes to Alec Martinez, you have to think about if they let him go, the $5.25 million, would their defense survive without Alec Martinez? My answer would be yes. Now, yes, the veteran leadership would be a bit of a downer, but you can't deny that letting go of Alec Martinez would open a roster spot and would open a starting spot for a younger player in Vegas. I understand that when it comes to Alex Pietrangelo, when it comes to Brayden McNabb, those are 2 veterans already in the locker room. I understand that Alec Martinez, he is one of the 3 veterans on this team. But would you be willing to shed $5.25 million? Would you be willing to let go of that veteran leadership if it meant getting to sign Nicholas Waugh? If it meant getting to sign Nicholas Hague? If it meant keeping Keegan Kolazar, who some fans want to keep? Keeping Brett Howden, who is a guy that some people in Vegas want to keep around? Getting rid of Alec Martinez, his $5.25 million, he is first priority because of the fact that when you let him go, there will be a young guy already you have on the roster that can replace him. You're not going to have to go out in free agency. You're not going to have to go out and get somebody to replace him. No, you already have someone in your organization. That starting lineup, by the way, if you took out Alec Martinez, it would be Alex Pietrangelo and Brayden McNabb on the first line. You would have Shea Theodore and Zach Whitecloud on the second line. And then you would have Ben Hutton and Dylan Coghlan on the third line. That would be a solid top 2 with the Vegas Golden Knights. Whitecloud and Theodore would be an excellent polar opposites. They'd be able to kind of counterbalance each other. And then the first one with Pietrangelo and McNabb, you have a two-way defenseman and you have a defensive-minded defenseman, both of them who had a very positive plus-minus this past season. So Alec Martinez is first priority. Second priority would be the guy who just can't seem to put the puck in the back of the net the same way he did when he first started. The second priority would be the 29-year-old from Sweden who is making $5.9 million until 2027. William Karlsson, he only scored 12 goals last year, which is a career low since joining the Vegas Golden Knights. As a matter of fact, William Karlsson, the last time he scored less than that was when he was splitting time with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he only scored 6 goals on the bottom 6. So William Karlsson seems like an easy priority number 2, but you got to remember one key aspect to this. Understand that the Vegas Golden Knights are in an awkward situation because William Karlsson is a fan favorite. William Karlsson is a guy that a lot of people in Vegas love from year one. He's an original misfit. So because he's an original misfit, because he's somebody that the fans have grown attached to, that's why it could be hard to let him go. You've already traded Marc-Andre Fleury. You already let go of certain players who are here from year one, but are you willing to sacrifice another? Are you willing to let go of somebody else from your year one team that could end up angering the fan base even more? Keep in mind that Riley Smith, like I said, there's like a 95% chance that he's gone. Okay? Understand there's a 95% chance that Riley Smith, who is an unrestricted free agent, is not coming back to Las Vegas. So, you're going to be getting rid of one of the KSM line. Are you willing to get rid of both? Are you willing to get rid of 2/3 of the KMS line? Because that KMS line was William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, and Riley Smith. So that's the first part of letting go of William Karlsson, is that fans are going to be attached to William Karlsson. He's been there for a while. He's been there since day one. And second is, if you trade William Karlsson, what are you going to have to give up to make it happen? What are you going to have to sacrifice to get him off your roster? Now, people brought up the buyout situation, but let me make a rebuttal for you. Let me give you a rebuttal for why buyouts rarely happen in hockey. Because when a buyout happens, it is the general manager admitting that they are wrong. When a buyout happens in the NHL, that is the general manager's way of not saying it, but admitting that they messed up by signing this said player to a contract. So, my argument when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights is that with William Karlsson, because he is a misfit, because he's a day one, they're either going to have to trade him and give up a valuable prospect or a valuable draft pick just to get rid of him, or they're going to have to buy him out, and George McPhee is going to have to admit that he messed up. George McPhee is going to have to admit that William Karlsson was not worth the $5.95 million that they gave him. So that's the second priority. The third priority is Max Pacioretty. Max Pacioretty is a $7 million cap hit. Max Pacioretty is going to be here for one more season. All right, 33 years old, going to be a free agent next offseason. So William Karlsson, he has the long-term deal. Alec Martinez is going to be here for at least 2 more years. The problem with Max Pacioretty is the length of contract. There really isn't going to be an organization in the NHL that is going to be willing to give up valuable assets for 1 year of Max Pacioretty. There's really not going to be a desperate team in the NHL that's going to be willing to give up a top draft pick or give up a high draft pick in order to take on the $7 million that Max Pacioretty is going to be having this offseason. You also have to remember that Max Pacioretty has a $7 million cap hit. But that with that $7 million cap hit, he also has a 10-team modified no-trade clause. So, because he has that 10-team no-trade clause, it's going to be difficult for the Vegas Golden Knights to trade him without getting the approval of Max Pacioretty. So, when it comes to Max Pacioretty, the reason why I have him as priority number 3 for the Vegas Golden Knights is because of the fact that because of his $7 million cap hit, it would be harder, it's not impossible, but it would be harder for the Vegas Golden Knights to get rid of that big of a contract and actually get anything worth of value. So, first priority is Alec Martinez, $5.25 million. Second priority would be William Karlsson, $5.95. And the third priority would be Max Pacioretty at $7 million. Now let's go to the comments real quick. Let's have your angle be heard here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. Get rid of Martinez, who has been hurt most of the year, and buy out Karlsson or trade him with 2 Henderson Silver Knights. Let me disagree with your argument. I will say Alec Martinez, once again, I do think that he would be the first one to go, considering the cap hit. I actually do agree with you on that. But with William Karlsson, it is just very difficult and it's very complicated to give up 2 prospects that could end up being good. It's very difficult as a general manager, as an executive, as a scout, as someone who actually is part of the organization. It is near difficult to try to get rid of a top prospect just to shed somebody off your salary. Understand that if you trade William Karlsson and you give up, for sake of the argument, let's just put a name out there. I'm not really, top of my head. Let's say you got rid of Brendan Bryson. Let's say that you trade the top prospect in the Vegas Golden Knights system just to get rid of William Karlsson. All right, let's say that you put Brendan Bryson, that contract of William Karlsson, and you trade it away to a team like Winnipeg. You trade it away to a team like LA. You put it out there to a team like Arizona. Okay? Understand that you're going to be giving up a 18-year-old, a guy who was a first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights in 2020, just to get rid of $5.95 million. Understand that the Vegas Golden Knights, in order to trade William Karlsson, would have to give up a guy like that. They would have to give up a 21-year-old, maybe like Pavel Dorov, who is a really skilled and a very talented performer in the AHL. I got to see him, the very good 21-year-old Russian, Pavel Dorov. I watched him play in Henderson with the Henderson Silver Knights. He put up 27 goals for Henderson. He was an excellent skater. I liked his athleticism. So getting rid of him just to flip William Karlsson, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to trade a 20 and 21-year-old alongside William Karlsson just to get rid of $5.95 million? And if you're wondering, yes, I'm asking the person that commented that question. Would you be willing to give up a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old, just to get rid of William Karlsson's contract. Because that 20 and 21-year-old could become somebody someday. That 20 and 21-year-old could become a solid NHLer in the future. And you'd be giving him up just as a main piece in a deal to get rid of William Karlsson. Vegas Golden Knights can call up Henderson Silver Knights to fill many of the holes and stay under the cap. Do whatever you have to keep Marchessault. I do agree with keeping Jonathan Marchessault. Signing him to a long-term extension would be best for the Vegas Golden Knights. Out of all the players from their expansion draft, Jonathan Marchessault should be the guy who stays here the longest. I'm obviously very biased, of course, but I honestly believe that he is the guy who's going to stay long-term. He is going to be the one that is going to be with Las Vegas the longest. I also believe that when it comes to Jonathan Marchessault, getting an extension done before his current contract is up would be best for business. Riley Smith is gone. Trade William Karlsson, but not Jonathan Marchessault. Jonathan Marchessault is the best player that has not been injured last year and would leave a huge hole if he left. Now, I don't think he's going to leave. I don't think that Jonathan Marchessault would ever leave unless Vegas just lowballed him to absolute oblivion. But when it comes to William Karlsson, you're going to have to trade him, but I'm just really afraid of what you'd have to give up in order to trade him. Riley Smith being gone, that feels like a no-brainer at this point. Unfortunately for Vegas Golden Knights fans, you might have to accept that. But I just look at it and I go, if he's going to be gone, if he's actually going to leave Vegas, then when he comes back, and hear me out on this, when Riley Smith comes back, when he joins Detroit, when he joins New York, when he joins his new organization, whichever one it is, you need to play a tribute video for when he comes back. When the Detroit Red Wings go to T-Mobile Arena and they play the Vegas Golden Knights for the first time, they better have that video being played, pre-game ceremony, welcoming back Riley Smith in full arms. Because Riley Smith, in his 5 seasons with the Vegas Golden Knights, was one of the biggest contributors to the Vegas Golden Knights. Riley Smith has done a lot for Las Vegas. What he does with a charity softball game, what Riley Smith has done with the community in Las Vegas. Riley Smith has been an ambassador for Las Vegas. He has been a class act for Las Vegas. And I am happy to see that Riley Smith, regardless of where he goes, I'm going to want to see him be successful in his new endeavor. Because Riley Smith was my first player I liked with the Vegas Golden Knights. Go ask my family. They'll tell you. Riley Smith was the first player I attached to the Vegas Golden Knights. Now you got Zach Whitecloud. Zach Whitecloud's kind of been my favorite player now with the Vegas Golden Knights moving forward. But with Riley Smith, he was the first. So I'm going to say that, and we're getting towards the end of the show here, that when he signs with Detroit, when he signs with New York, when he signs with whatever team he goes to this offseason, you better play a tribute video for Riley Smith so that the fans can welcome him back in style. Patrick Reddy can go. He has been injured a lot this year. Yeah, but once again, that $7 million cap hit and that 10-team no trade clause is going to make it more difficult. And by the way, he was never in Edmonton. He was actually in Montreal. He was in Quebec. So, yeah, he was never in Edmonton, by the way. Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Shout out to all my Canadians, by the way. You're a huge supporter of the show somehow. So I give a lot of respect to my Canadians for watching the show. Then trade Karlsson and Martinez. Can I point out that that's near impossible? Can I point out that is something that I do not see happening? Alec Martinez and William Karlsson would equal $11.1 million. Do you know how many NHL teams have $11.1 million in cap space? I'll tell you, by the way. Not many. Outside of the Arizona Coyotes, Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, and Anaheim Ducks, there really isn't any organization that can willingly take on two big contracts and keep them on the roster. There really isn't any organization outside of those four that you could dump a big contract on and it would actually be balanced. It actually would be correct. Understand that every other organization has to sign a bunch of players. A bunch of these organizations would have to take on that deal, and you're not going to see that happening. You're really not going to see teams with that big of a cap hit. Understand the Vegas Golden Knights, I talked about their $200,000 cap hit. Well, you got to realize that teams like Montreal, teams like Tampa Bay, who are currently over the cap, they're going to have to make trades too. There's been a lot of reports that Tampa Bay might use Anaheim as a cap dump. There's been reports that Montreal may go to Detroit and use them as a cap dump. So, I mean, if Vegas could call up Buffalo again and try to have them take on a bunch of money, then maybe I see your point. But unless you're going to go to Buffalo, Arizona, Detroit, Anaheim, but at the same time, Boston's going to be doing the same thing as Vegas. Montreal's going to be doing the same thing as Vegas. Tampa Bay is going to be doing the same thing as Vegas. You're going to be seeing these teams, they're going to be shedding salary. And eventually, that well is going to dry up. You can only give away so many players to Arizona, Buffalo, Detroit, and Anaheim before eventually they're not able to do it either. So this is the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I want to say watch all the content on PR Connections Radio. We got The Power with Brian Gardner. You got Voices of Humanity. You have the Defenders of Finance with Big Tex. Understand that there's a lot of great content here on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. So I recommend checking out all of the content. They had a new episode of We Got the Power and Voices of Humanity that was released earlier today. So go onto the Facebook at PR Connections Radio, go to SoundCloud, PR Connections, go to all social media, and watch PR Connections Radio. And until next time, this is the Sports Angle at prconnectionsradio.com. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. Have a great weekend and stay safe.